Hey everyone, Ryan Young, Kama Jiu-Jitsu, and today's actually a good day. Every day is a good day, really, but today's a special day for the fact alone that we hit 1,000 subscribers on Kama Jiu-Jitsu's YouTube channel, and I want to thank you all for subscribing. Thank you all for sharing our videos as well. If you feel that the information is good and useful and it helps you understand Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, whatever variety of Jiu-Jitsu you like to train, or just submission wrestling, it's always good to kind of see where our roots are. Now, in celebration of that, I wanted to do, I guess, a post today, or a video today, on the Gracie family champions. Back in the old days, when I say old days, meaning old days of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, they had family champions. And the reason is because everything was pretty well self-contained. You had Carlos, who was the patriarch of the family, his brother Helio, who was the implementer of Carlos's vision for the family, and everything kind of remained under their umbrellas until really, I would say, 1990s, when Grandmaster Carlos passed away. And once that happened, then by then you already have 2-3 generations in the family, and they're kind of doing their own thing, and you really didn't have the ability to have a unified front anymore. So the first family champion, really, once Carlos kind of had his vision, because he from what I understood, he taught 4 of his brothers. For a while, people were saying that his brother George was technically the best fighter, but he and Carlos would kind of butt heads because he wanted to do his own thing. Carlos wanted to manage everything, and George really wasn't into that. Kind of wanted to do his own thing and didn't want Carlos to control it. So he kind of broke off from being managed by his brother Carlos. Whereas Helio, the baby of the family, I think he was, what, 20 years younger than Carlos? I don't know. He admired, idolized his older brother, and did pretty much what his older brother said. So it was kind of a perfect thing, relationship between the two, and I kind of mentioned that in another video that we did earlier. But Helio, for all intents and purposes, Carlos wasn't really the family champion. He was the first one to do it, and therefore he was by default. But he couldn't really be a champion of the family because he was one creating it all. So it was what he created in the first generation, which is his brothers, and the first champion really was his brother Helio. When I say family champ, that means when it's time to set up a fight, Gracie Jiu-Jitsu versus something else, you're going to put your best family fighter forward, and that was Helio for a number of years. That was until he fought with Valdemar Santana, who was actually a former student of his, who was, I guess he was pretty poor, and thought he could make some extra money being a prize fighter. And from what I understand, I don't think he was a professor level yet. Wanted to fight, Helio said no, and I guess if you're thinking in terms of, putting food on my table, then he might come back and say, well, I'm pretty offended that you wouldn't let me fight. And Helio, being the one controlling everything, said, no, I mean, you do it my way or you don't do it all. And I guess words kind of heated up, as a challenge. Ended up, he fought Helio. Now, Helio was into his 40s by then. That's a fight that went 3 hours, incredibly, 3 hours. How do you fight 3 hours? But 3-hour fight, and eventually Helio was knocked out by a kick to the head by Santana. Also, they say that Helio had the flu, but being the macho guy that he is, he wasn't going to turn down a challenge. So even though it was his own student, went and did it. And after that, promptly, Santana was challenged by Carlson. So Carlson Sr. Was the next step in line. I think he was 18 when he fought with Santana. And Santana was somebody who Carlson knew. I mean, he grew up training in the academy when Santana was there too. So it was kind of an honor thing. You I guess had the nerve to challenge my uncle. Now it's my turn, and I'm gonna dispatch of you. I think they fought a bunch of times, 3-4 times. I think a couple of them turned out to be draws, and Carlson ended up winning one of them. I don't know how many fights he went through. I've heard rumors that he went 600-0, but there was actually a fight that he lost by some kind of referee decision. Of course, a true Gracie Jiu-Jitsu practitioner is not going to really accept that as a loss. I mean, I didn't submit, you didn't knock me out. some referee said that I lost. Yeah, it's like, whatever. Yeah, I don't think I lost. That was one of his fights, but I think he pretty much won every other fight other than that. He is the oldest of Carlos's sons, and I think he was born in 1931 or 32, something like that. And then the next champion after Carlson was, he had a bunch of brothers that were all, very good fighters. Carlson Gracie likes to say he was the champion of the family. I think he calls himself the lion of the Gracie family. He says that nobody in the family beat him. I don't know. I'm not one to say anything about a grandmaster. If that was the case, and that's the case. But as far as what I've heard, knowing family members over the years and talking to them, his name never came up. The next family champion that came up was Halls. I guess maybe about 17 years ago in 2000, Carlson Gracie did an interview, and they asked him who the best Gracie Jiu-Jitsu practitioner ever was. And he said his brother Halls. Halls was the unique individual in that he was the son of Carlos Sr., but was raised as Helio Gracie's oldest son. He wasn't a very big guy. I think maybe 5'7", 5'8", probably about $145, probably about maybe Helio size. But he was phenomenal in that he had the mindset of a champion. He was always trying to win, and he would even go outside of the art to study wrestling, and he took a look at Sambo, he took a look at Judo, to try to find a way to see if there's any commonality, and if there's no commonality, let me see what they're doing that could be better, and bringing it into Jiu-Jitsu. And that's where Halls came in. Now with Halls, he was kind of unique in that, in a way, he was like his biological father Carlos, in that he was well liked, well liked, highly regarded. Nobody seemed to have a bad thing to say about him. Very much a unifier type of person, and he died at a very young age. I want to say 31 years old in a hang gliding crash, and it was those things where he was just a very, I guess he was, in today's terms, we'd call him an adrenaline junkie. Always going for daring type activities because that's what he got a charge out of. But as far as his jiu-jitsu, it was top notch, to the point where even today you'll have a lot of people that will say Halls was the best that ever lived. Hard to say though, because, and I think he was born in, was it 1951? He was about 20 years younger than Carlson. So if anybody says, well, Carlson versus Halls, well, Carlson would come out and say that Halls was the family champion, but I'm sure a lot of Carlson's students, his loyal students, and he had probably the most loyal students of all to a certain extent, but they all regarded Carlson with so much love and so much adoration that they would go to battle for him just to protect his name. And they might have a difference of opinion on who's better. But Carlson Sr. did come out and say that, in his opinion, Halls was the best. Now you have Rickson, and Rickson, I think, was born in 58. When Santana had a student, and that student was named, I think it was his brother, Waldo Santana. He wanted somebody to fight his brother. Oh, no, I take it back. It was Zulu. When he and Helio kind of got back onto good terms, he had told Helio, hey, I've got a student named Hey Zulu that nobody can beat. Would you like to put somebody up against him? And Halls wanted to do it, but Helio had Rickson do it. Rickson was 18 years old, and why he had Rickson do it, I don't know. He definitely was confident that Rickson would win, and I'm sure that Halls would have won as well. But I think part of it had to do with the weight difference, because Rickson was probably about $180 at that time, whereas Halls was about $145. And Zulu was, I think they were saying 20 kilos more than Rickson, so about 40 pounds more than Rickson, which would make him about 60 pounds more than Halls. So you could say, well, maybe, with Rickson being as good as he was, even at the age of 18, I think Helio might have looked at the size thing and thought, well, he might have a better chance versus Halls, and the weight difference is just too much. They say, well, didn't Halls have superior technique? Who knows? I don't know. And can't Gracie Jiu-Jitsu technique beat anybody as far as size? No, I mean, in fact, I have a video that I did that's called The Secret Formula of Jiu-Jitsu. Pretty interesting. You might want to take a look at that. And it kind of goes over the whole thing about your physicality and your technique and how they interact with each other. So one thing that I noticed is that here you have a generation between Helio and Carlson. You can't compare the two because they're of separate generations. And then you have basically a generation, about 20 years, between Carlson Sr. and Halls. So you can't compare those two either because you could never get them on the mat at the same time when they're both sometime in their prime to see who's better. However, you kind of did have that situation here. There's about 7 years difference. Hall's died at age 31, so that would have made Rickson about age 24. So, you know, by all means, Rickson wasn't necessarily at his peak physically or technically, whereas Halls might have been in that range. You could say it's close enough. I mean, he's got a size advantage. I don't know if he had a height advantage at all. Maybe if he did, maybe an inch or two, and then weight-wise, maybe about 20 pounds, maybe more. I don't know. You know, a lot of people would say, no, Halls is really the best ever. And other people would say, no, Rickson is the best ever. Now, what you do is you kind of look to the most recent thing that you have in that, you know, Hall's been dead since 1982, so 35 years or so. He's a year older than Helio Gracie, so he would have been about 66, 67 by now. Rickson was interviewed by Joe Rogan and Eddie Bravo, and Joe Rogan asked a lot of the questions that everybody's kind of wondering, you know, namely about the Yogi Angel fight, and in particular, the Halls versus Rickson thing. As far as I know, prior to that, Rickson never talked about it. Rickson is a very private person, doesn't really like to talk about that kind of stuff, but I guess Joe Rogan put him on the spot. There's a few ways that he can kind of talk about how he compared to Halls, because there's a video that's circling around where it looks like they're training in the backyard or the back porch of somewhere, and Halls is just, you know, he does a nice foot sweep and tosses Rickson, and then Rickson gets right back up and goes after him. But it looked like Halls was all over Rickson at the time. So a lot of people would then say, well, you know, based on that, you know, it only makes sense that Halls was better because that's Rickson. Well, how old was Rickson? Was Rickson 18? Was he 19? Or was he 23, right? But in that interview, Rickson said, okay, let me put it to you this way. He says, let's say you look at 30 matches, right, between he and Halls at the academy. He says, if you look at the first 10, he said Halls would smash him, just kill him. The next 10, Rickson was saying how he was starting to not get tapped, but starting to hold his own very well. He said the final 10, he said he started to catch Halls up, and he ended up beating him. And then at that point in time, Halls just didn't train with him anymore. Now, why would Halls not train with him anymore? Well, you could look at it a couple ways. If you're thinking, if it's kind of an ego thing, and Halls is not ready to pass the torch on, then the fewer instances you have of Rickson beating you, the better. Or it could be, yeah, Rickson, you know, you've been working all this time to catch me. You finally caught me. Good job. You're the guy now. I don't know. That's where we are with the family champions. Now, after Rickson, are there any family champions? I would say no. There are numerous people that are really, really good. Rickson retired the champ. He's undisputed as far as the family goes. I think he retired when he was in his early 40s and said, okay, that was done. He put his coral belt on. I don't know if any of you kind of noticed it, but for the longest time, he was, let's see, 20 years after his black belt, so it should have been 38. That's where he gets his 7th degree, and that's where he gets his coral belt. He didn't wear his coral belt for a number of years. And I think he was still wearing his black belt into his 8th degree, so 30 years in. So that would be, what, 18, 23, 40. So even in his 40s, late 40s? I don't know exactly when he retired, but he did. And then at that point in time, he was wearing his coral belt with 8 degrees on it. Once they put the coral belt on, generally that's when they're saying they're retired. And that I got from Carlson when he got his coral belt at age 42. He said, he goes, yeah, I wear mine. But I think Rickson, I think he and Rickson are about 4 years apart. I can't remember offhand. But I think he had told me later on that Rickson doesn't see himself as retired, so he wears his black belt, even though he should be wearing a coral belt. And that's where I understood that the coral belt means that you're basically retired from fighting, from competition, whatever. You're now concentrating on building the art and building your student base or building other people's student base. I don't know, just spreading the art. That's what I understand about Rickson. But there are many people who like, you know, the thing goes on and on and on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do another video, and I'm going to do what I see as the major difference between Halls and Rickson. But as far as fast forward today, do we have any champions? I would say no, although a lot of people would say that Helio Gracie is probably the family champion. He's well into his 30s now. Same with Rickson Gracie. Helio Gracie is a little bit younger, but I don't know, maybe between them, they might have had a match, but they just really don't say anything. I really don't think, being that there's no more Carlos or Helio as the patriarch of the family, there's nobody really determining everything and kind of getting everybody's family together and say, okay, you know, let's get together, let's figure out who of the current generation is the best one, and let's have that person represent our family. Because every Gracie family member now chooses to make their living their own way. Some of them fight, some of them have academies, some of them run the seminar circuit. So it would kind of be in their best interest for everyone to assume that they are the family champion, if that makes any sense. Whereas before, when you have a patriarch running the family, then you kind of have a top-down control of everything. So that's what I have with the Gracie family champions: Helio, Carlos Sr., Halls, Rickson, and really, I think the family champion for the Gracie, the concept of the family champion with the Gracies dies at Rickson. Anyway, that's all I got for you, and hope you like it. If you like it, share it, subscribe, hit the like button. If you don't like it, hit the don't like button. It's all good for me. So anyway, take care of yourselves, be safe in training, and happy training. Take care, bye.